Welcome to the final ACC Panic Room. Tried to go to, what was it? Was it the MCI Center? No, the Verizon Center at the time in 2016 at the ACC Tournament in Washington, D.C. But the budget would not allow. So here we are on StreamYard doing the final ACC Panic Room, Lauren.
Yeah, I was going to say I was pregnant when we did that. And now my son is about to be 7. So it's crazy when you think about it.
Pretty sure I had more hair in that one too, in the first Panic Room, but that's
I
another
probably did too, to be fair.
That's another conversation for another day. All right, so let's start with the NCAA tournament and work our way backwards. The teams that are in, the teams that are not in.
Well, that won't take long.
The team that doesn't want to play in the other postseason tournament. And then we'll look back on the ACC tournament in Greensboro this past weekend. Yeah, you're right. The teams that are in, it's not going to take a long time. 5 teams in the NCAA tournament, Lauren. I'm not surprised that it's 5 teams. What I am surprised is at how close there could have been more, but that really does kind of crystallize the entire point of the ACC season. Had they just done a little bit more, we'd have a completely different conversation this season.
And you know what? You could say a lot of things about North Carolina's season, but one thing you can't say is that they weren't helpful to their conference mates. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because aren't they still a quad 1? They missed the tournament, and they're still like one of the league's only quad 1 wins that anybody had. Think of how many like tripwires were out there in quads 3 and 4. You know what I mean? And North Carolina was just out there like, hey, please, we have a good win here. Would you like to have a good win? We're right here. Here you go.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other teams, and it's kind of a story of the season because like the other teams didn't do that. They weren't as helpful, as North Carolina was, because the schedule, for a combination of reasons, we've parsed through some of it. You can't control the early season tournaments. Any other year you play a Loyola, you play like, even State's case, you play a Butler, it's going to look a lot better than it did, this year. I saw some people kind of bring up State's non-con. I don't think State's non-con was bad enough to get them punished, and their record overall was good enough. Plus, no bad losses. They've done enough. They also have more good wins. They were always fine for those reasons. But if you want to talk about the gap between State and Carolina, we probably could. But by the end of the year, to me, like they're about where they should be in terms of like the disparity between the way that they're playing right now.
Yeah.
You want to talk about Clemson, okay, fine. But at the same time, like Clemson, I don't know how you make sense of that resume either. We've talked about it. Like, I don't envy the committee on this. I really don't.
Let's go ahead and pull this up. If you look at Clemson's team sheet, we'll get to Carolina here in a second. But since you brought up Clemson and why they're not in the NCAA tournament, they got 6 wins. This was pointed out to me by a listener. They got 6 wins against teams that are in the field from the ACC. I'm like, yeah, but half of those were blowouts against NC State, and I'm not quite sure that's going to be enough. If you want to know why Clemson's not in the NCAA tournament, you can look right there at the strength of schedule. Wake Forest and NC State in previous years can sit here and nod along going, yep, that's going to be the thing that puts you in the bad place in the NCAA selection committee's eyes. So you look at their non-conference net strength of schedule, it's in the 300s. You look at the RPI non-conference strength of schedule, it's in the 300s. When you look at their losses, they've got bad losses on the resume too, including Louisville late in the season.
That's a problem.
If you lose to Louisville at the beginning of the year when things are still kind of like unsettled, okay, well then maybe I can justify it. But you lost to Louisville in February when they're historically one of the worst teams we've ever seen in the NCAA. Shout out to Aaron Beard, who has an NCAA tournament bylaw that he created while sitting next to me in Greensboro for the ACC tournament. It's the LV clause. You lost to Louisville, and that's what's going to keep you out. So, and look, this is where I understand in the case of, Brian Ives have pointed this out. If I could pull up his tweet here in a second as I'm doing some live ACC Panic Room editing on the fly. So Brian Ives, our friend over at the ACC Network, pointing out that Clemson at 14-6 in ACC play is the best record to miss the NCAA tournament since it expanded to 64 teams back in 1985.
We just started the 20-game schedule though, so like some of those records, like I've kind of side-eyed a bit because I'm like, yeah, you're gonna set a wins record when there's like this many more games. And I mean, they only just moved to 18, I feel like, fairly recently. So.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's funny that it's Chris Daggum Box Scores on Twitter, who does a newsletter that I highly recommend everybody follow, actually dug up an old article from 2005 that had coaches lamenting the unbalanced schedule and how it was going to affect you. And to your point, not only did Clemson have a bad strength of schedule non-conference, the unbalanced schedule did not do them any favors.
No,
and then
that's
on top of that, they lost to those teams like Louisville in the unbalanced schedule.
Like, there's no margin for error, right? If you have teams on the schedule that aren't going to help you, you have to beat those teams.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. And, you look at like a State and a Carolina, for example, right? And like, those teams don't have bad losses. They really don't. Neither of them do. State's worst one is at Syracuse, and that's, on the road by 2 points. Mm-hmm. Clemson loses by 10. At 10, and then they lost by 18 to Loyola. You know what I mean? Like, you can't. That's the other part. It's not like those teams are upsetting you on a buzzer beater. Like, right. I think the committee looks at that. And yes, Clemson had injuries early on, and they've had other factors go into some of those games. Do I think they look the part? Yeah, like we all saw them in Greensboro.
Sure,
I've seen them in other games. I actually think the Carolina game ended up killing them because you can't. That was the last time Carolina showed a pulse. Right? Pretty much. Wasn't it? I think Clemson was after Virginia, right? Or was it before? I don't know.
No, no. The Clemson game was before Virginia.
Okay,
after they beat Clemson at home.
You can't go to Carolina and get blown out like that. And they got blown out more than they should have. That didn't help. Yeah. It's just, it is what it is. And the thing is too, and this is where I struggle some too. And I'm not trying to bang on Clemson too much. I know I've done that before, but it wouldn't be an ACC Panic Room if I'm not at Clemson basketball. But they have done bad non-conference schedules in the past, and it has hurt them. And the thing is, you see, it hurts everyone else. It doesn't just hurt Clemson. It hurts everybody else in the league, because then when they play you, they're playing like a 75th ranked team instead of a top 50 team. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I know that some things happen that are kind of beyond your control, but it's not that hard to game the system a little bit and schedule a little bit better, or at least perform better in non-con too. ACC teams tend as a whole, with exceptions, like Virginia's gotten way better, obviously, with their non-con. Duke and Carolina every year always go pretty strong. I think State did well enough. You've gotta win some of those games too. You can't perform poorly against it. You can't. Boston College scheduled easy, but then they lose to New Hampshire and Maine, and then they go into league play beating. That's what I'm saying. It all has a domino effect. And when everybody else in your league is not up to par from a net standpoint, you're kind of screwed for the rest of the season.
Meanwhile, North Carolina has the opposite problem of Clemson. They had a good schedule. The problem is they didn't win enough games in their good schedule, and that put them in the bad place for the NCAA selection committee.
Look at how many fewer 3 and 4s than Clemson are there.
Right.
I'm just saying. Right. I'm just pointing that out.
So you look at their quad 4, you look at their quad 3. They've got no bad losses on the schedule. You look at their strength of schedule both in the net and the RPI. It's very, very good.
And most of their games, I think only one double-digit loss, if I'm not mistaken. 1 or 2.
And this is why North Carolina ends up being one of the last 4 teams considered, is because of their opportunities. But again, it gets back to you have to do something with your opportunities.
Yes,
and that's when you get to the quad 1s. I'm telling you right now, the more and more I think about it and the more I've looked at the team sheet, the more I'm convinced that if Alabama had not gone to 4 freaking overtimes and they somehow pull out that game, they're in the NCAA tournament.
This is where I disagree. And I understand why it gets brought up, right? I get it. But I think it's more about what they did late. Would that have helped them? Sure. But if there's something in 12 and we're scuffling as badly as we've been seeing them scuffle, do you really think the discourse around them would have been that different?
So would you flip it? So would you flip it with the Alabama game and say, let's say they beat Duke at Cameron or at the Smith Center? Because the thing about Carolina is it's not, and that's the other thing about Carolina too. If this is why I ultimately come down to this isn't a tournament team, because they had opportunities to win these Q1 games. They had second half leads in a good chunk of these Q1 opportunity games, and they let these things go. And Duke certainly comes to mind in both instances.
Yeah, I mean they had so many chances, like you said, they had chances to get what they needed to get done. Even like you said, Virginia ACC Tournament, you got Duke, they had their chances, they couldn't get it done, and it is what it is. They had plenty of times where they could have gotten one more quad one, so you could pin it all on Alabama if you want. But to me, I don't know that changes the way we're talking about them right now, and I think that plays a little bit of a role too.
Is Alex getting it done?
Yeah,
right
I might
now?
need to check on that. Just hold on 2 seconds.
What's that? What's going on there? I'll go solo layout here for a second. You guys can check out all the things that are going on in the background. All right, so as we were discussing with with Carolina and Clemson, they're one of the last 4 teams out. Both Carolina and Clemson. Pitt ends up being one of the last teams in. So let's go back to the Twitter machines, and we will go through the teams that actually did end up making it for the NCAA tournament. We go to the South. Hey, Lauren's back. Let's welcome back Lauren, shall we? Alex taken care of?
Yeah, he could not find the toilet paper.
Oh, hey, you know what happens to all of us? What better way to have last panic room than Alex not finding toilet paper? It really does just kind of bring everything full circle on this endeavor. Anyway, so to the South region, where in my small print, NC State gets in as the 11 seed in a matchup against Creighton, which Brownlow. I mean, North Carolina's not in the tournament, but
does State lose just to spite Carolina fans that would want them to win? I'm just
kidding. Well, here's my question, because I don't know the proper answer. Do Carolina fans want State to beat Creighton, or do they want State to suffer the same issues that happened when Creighton and North Carolina met up in the Wink and
issues with injuries? I don't think so. No.
Okay.
I would highly doubt it. And I actually the rivalry discourse aside, there is not a State fan I know in real life that would ever root for Carolina in anything. The opposite isn't true for me, though. And this isn't me saying, they take it more seriously. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just genuinely, heck, I know a bunch of people that fell in love with DJ Burns this year. Yeah, I'm just saying, they loved watching him play. They've loved State. So, but that's not, whatever. It's neither here nor there. I know more Carolina people that would root for State in a game like that because they have beef with a team like Creighton than vice versa. So I think that most of them probably won't be super thrilled either way or engaged. You know what I mean? But I think if State wins, then they'll probably have some snarky comments to make in support of that happening.
The only thing I got about this particular part of the bracket for NC State is that I'm kind of sad we're not going to Denver because I love Denver. Denver's a great spot.
You had me at Denver, yeah. When I saw Denver, I'm like, dude. Oh.
Meanwhile, Virginia's taking on what is that? They're taking on Furman, the Paladins. They're in. That's very, very exciting for them. Now, speaking of areas, I was shocked that not a single ACC team was going to Greensboro, right? Since Virginia wasn't going to Greensboro, people were thinking, well, maybe Duke ends up in Greensboro. No, that actually doesn't happen either. Duke is going to Orlando. I actually texted my brother to be like, hey, man, you can actually go, I don't know, go argue against Duke or get your ACC vibes. I don't know what you're going to do. Anyway, Duke ends up being in the East, which is the side of the bracket that has all the names to it. It's funny that it's like a Rorschach test for people. People see names and they think, man, it's loaded. But then you've got Purdue, which just went to the brink with Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. And you and I both in agreement when it comes to the Big Ten. We're not exactly fans of the Big Ten. This happens all the time. People just absolutely love the Big Ten, and then when it comes to the tournament, they usually flame out. So Purdue, chances are, they are not going to Final Four. They are not going to be seeing Duke at any time.
Yeah, where do we have them going? Did they lose in round 2 to Penny Hardaway, or
probably? Probably.
We don't even get the rematch we would love of Derek Lively, and yeah, no. I mean, it's an interesting bracket for sure. It's not one I'd love to be in, to be honest. It has a lot of teams in it, not Purdue necessarily, that are I would rather not play them right now. Especially, I mean, Duke's first opponent, honestly, Oral Roberts. That's a team that has been dangerous for at least a couple years now, still has one of the better players in the country. In Max, I still don't know how to pronounce his name because it's not how it's spelled at all. But he's awesome.
Yes.
It's like Asmus, even though it's like spelled completely not like that at all. But he's awesome. Like, he's really efficient. I think Duke's defense will have like a lot to say about what he does, and I think he probably hasn't seen a lot of defenders like Duke has. But at the same time, like, that's the type of game that Oral Roberts can score. Mm-hmm. And if they get going and the building gets going against Duke, because honestly, Duke doesn't hate not being in Greensboro. Let's be real.
No, okay, right? So I'm glad you brought that up, because and this is something that Luke DeCock and I have bounced back and forth, columnist for the News and Observer. That was a really good crowd for Duke in Greensboro.
They show up in the ACC tournament. It's always a good crowd for them in the ACC tournament, especially as they go further. But for NCAAs,
we've talked that I think it's different, and we've talked about it in the Panic Room. Luke puts it with all locals, no tourists. The last couple of years of Coach K, and especially last year, the crowds were very much gawking. They weren't there necessarily to watch basketball, in my opinion. I think they were just there to witness history, and I don't blame them for that. And the crowds at Cameron Indoor Stadium throughout this season have been thinner. I'm not bringing it up as some sort of indictment on Duke fans. You can look across the ACC and understand the crowds are thinner. Their crowds have been thinner at Carolina, crowds thinner at NC State, even though they turned things around this season. It's just a pain in the ass to get to games. It's more expensive than it used to be. There's all sorts of factors why people aren't going to games as much as they used to. But that being said, thinner crowds at Cameron, but louder, more raucous. Yeah. And I think that kind of lent itself to Greensboro. So I think I've used the season with John Shire to kind of like unlearn some things we've gotten used to when we talk about Duke. So I get what you're saying. Traditionally, under Mike Krzyzewski, there are people there who just want to boo Mike Krzyzewski. Right. This Duke team doesn't bring it out of you. This Duke team's freaking likable. John Shire is likable.
No, I mean, I agree with that. But I still think Duke in the NCAA tournament in Greensboro perhaps gets slightly less friendly treatment. Fair. Although maybe because there's no other ACC team there, maybe it's not as bad. It was always worse when like Carolina was there too, obviously. But the crowd would tend to get behind, no matter where Duke was. The crowd would tend to get behind whoever Duke was playing, especially if it was close. And I think that could happen this time too, but really more just in an underdog sense than like a Duke hating sense. And I think for the most part they should have a pretty friendly crowd there, I think. Not an antagonistic one.
I think you and I can both agree that Oral Roberts and Duke will provide amazing headlines one way or the other. We'll go with that. Meanwhile, over to the Midwest, we got Miami versus Drake. I feel like that's I think that's like a rap mixtape waiting to happen. But no, Miami and Drake. Miami without Norchad Omier, who went out in the NCAA in the ACC tournament. It does kind of take some air out of what we've seen out of Miami, but I still think in that Duke matchup, they played at a high level. Every time Duke looked like they were going to be running away with it, Miami found ways to get back, hit big shots, get big rebounds, etc. So I'm not selling on Miami yet. Yeah. But I can see why Omier certainly adds a level of uncertainty to the Hurricanes.
Yeah, I was impressed, honestly, because I was expecting, when that happened, I was just expecting them to get blown out at that point. Mm-hmm. And that's not what happened. And so, I think credit to them. And I like their potential cautiously. It's hard because, like, how many ACC teams have shown that they're trustworthy in the NCAA tournament? Like, not a whole lot. Right. Do I trust, like, Jim Larinaga, though, to get his guys as ready as they can be? Like, absolutely I do. Mm-hmm. And do I think that, like, the higher seeds in their bracket are beatable? Yes. And so, if they were like full health, I'd be super gung-ho about them, but I just don't know. There's a lot we don't know yet. And so I'm kind of cautious with them, but I was impressed with the way that they played. They had that was a game way later than it probably should have been with you.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Now back to North Carolina, and they've decided to not participate in the NIT. For the record, North Carolina is not the first team to bail on the NIT. They're not the last team to bail on the NIT. Decisions are made when it comes to this tournament. I can see the argument for teams to go to the NIT when it makes sense. and I can also understand, given context, when it doesn't make sense. North Carolina specifically, people bring up 2010, and I like to point out, well, 2010 was a completely different dynamic coming off a championship season with a new group of guys.
And it was mostly younger guys and guys that honestly, for the most part, I think had started playing better and showing glimpses towards the end of the year. So you're at the point where you look at that and go, do you want to continue that? And you say, yes. Yeah. This is a group that's played together for how many games now?
I mean, over the course of 3 years,
what,
for the
like
most
90?
part?
I don't know.
Yeah.
80 some?
Yeah. What? And it's not like Hubert Davis is going to go to the NIT and tell RJ Davis, Armando Bacot, and Caleb Love, why don't you guys take these couple of weeks off? We're going to play the young guys. It doesn't work that way. Well, so here's the statement. Here's a statement from Hubert Davis. All season, our focus and goal has been on being the best team that we can possibly become and reaching our full potential to give us another opportunity to compete, play for, and win a national championship. Although we are no longer having that opportunity, the season wasn't what we hoped for. I want to thank our players, blah, 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 blah. Many factors go into postseason play, and we don't want to do it. We're going to reset, essentially. That's what he is saying. And here's where things start to get dicey with North Carolina. There is this attitude, first and foremost, and this is I think this is going to be an unpopular opinion, and I'm okay with it, because I think I'm coming from a place of understanding that college basketball is in a different place too. Yeah, I appreciate North Carolina and Hubert Davis's honesty in the statement. They came back to win an NCAA championship, not an NIT championship, and has how hard and have, like, everything about this season was difficult. Everything about this season was difficult. In the sense that I got in Greensboro, when everything was over, they were done. And I think for the most part, Carolina fans, if they're being honest with themselves, they were done too. So I'm not really
I think Carolina fans understand this probably better than most. It feels like a little like concern trolling.
But I don't know, because I've been seeing from some Carolina fans that they're very upset that they're not going, that this team quit. Well, I mean, if you want to use this as a crystallization that they did, okay, fine.
But my thing is, like, what else do you need to see from them?
Right. What do you need to see? It's over.
To me, that's the thing. Like, what else do you want to see from them, and what benefit is there for them going? Like you said, in theory, it'd be great if they could play and develop the young guys. Mm-hmm. But that clearly isn't what they want to do. And they don't have enough, I think. Like, they can't just put out the younger guys. I don't think that's a full enough lineup. No, you know what I mean? Like, and also, what would they last in the tournament? Maybe a game? They barely played all year. And then they get two extra practices and go home. Like, what's the point of that?
I got a working theory. There were already people who were never sold on Hubert Davis to begin with as the head coach. And we saw this all of last year up until they went on a run, and we've discussed it ad nauseum, what happened next. And I think the way things have played out this year has brought back those people. We've seen this at NC State, by the way, with Kevin Keatts, where there was, and now Kevin Keatts has a much larger sample size at NC State. But last year, people made up their minds on Kevin Keatts. And while this season was good, how they got beat by Clemson at the ACC Tournament, and who knows what happens in the NCAA Tournament, is going to bring those people who were never sold on Kevin Keatts back out of the woodwork. So I think the same thing is happening here with Hubert Davis on a much more accelerated cycle, because things at Carolina are accelerated because of the expectations related to being a UNC basketball coach. So I think that this is, to use an old Star Trek term, situation. It's a Kobayashi Maru. Some people will get that. Shout out to Holden Thorpe, former chancellor, who obviously understands that situation. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you go to the NCAA tournament, like you said, and they lose after a game or two, well, then everybody's going to be like, why'd you do this anyway? This was dumb.
It's a waste of time.
It's a waste of time. This team, they got no heart, blah, 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 blah. Now, they say straight up, hey, we failed in our mission this year. We wanted to win an NCAA championship. We failed, and we're done, and we're going to assess what we need to do to get back there next season. That's got people dunking on Hubert Davis with, you quit. If you were invited, you accept. You go and play and win for that championship. I think people have already made up their minds on Hubert, and they're going to use whatever they can to slam the guy. But I appreciate the honesty. And Lauren, look, we talked about this at the ACC Panic Room. At the ACC Tournament. You have to get on your roster management now. That's the current state of college basketball. Decisions are being made now, and that's what Hubert Davis has to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to figure out what moving forward looks like. And I think going to the NIT and prolonging this season doesn't help in that process. I just don't think anything productive was going to happen based on it. And no, I mean, the only reason I said concern trolling is because, like, I got one thing that say that they think they're too good for it. And I'm like, trust me, if anything, it's the opposite. Like, they know that they're not good at, like, they're not going to gain anything from it. They're going to leave it early. It's going to be a waste of everyone's time. Just like, really, in hindsight, it feels like the last few weeks of the season were for them. So, like, what's the point? You know? And I think, like you said, I think it's refreshing that there's honesty. You knew the writing was on the wall the moment one of your better players and leaders is saying that he doesn't want to play in it. Like, he said it right after the game. So what's Hubert supposed to do? He's going to make him? He's going to make him go? He's going to make him run?
The argument is Roy did. Well, Roy made him. Well, that was Roy, man. Roy. Also,
can we talk about the fact that Roy only did that because he saw there was an obvious benefit and he saw it. He hated every second of that.
He did.
I promise.
You're right. No, you're absolutely right.
I could tell. Like, you could tell. He almost seemed embarrassed when they kept winning. I remember. It's like, oh, are we going to win this? That's somehow more embarrassing than, like...
Yeah, they were... I was going to say, in the two instances they went to the NIT in modern history, they were the runner-up twice, right? They were runners-up in 2003, and they were runners-up in
But I think, like, that team got a lot out of... No, I mean, I'm half joking about Roy. I do think that I do remember him seeming embarrassed after the William & Mary win, because it was, A, it was closer than they wanted it to be, and then B, like, he's like, I'm in the NIT, and this is what we're doing, really. But, you know, I mean, I think that again, there was an obvious benefit to be gained there. There's just not one here. And if they can get one out of it, they would take it. I think that Roy would have had any team of his that could have had a benefit in the NIT no matter what. They're not too good for the NIT. That's not what's going on here either. It's just that there's no, and it's not, I saw it compared to a football bowl game. It's not remotely analogous for several reasons. Like, you have more young guys. You could play a whole roster of young guys if you wanted in a bowl game and no one would bat an eye. How many teams go to the NIT and bench everyone? We don't see that. No one does that. And it doesn't happen in college basketball. You wouldn't see it. You're not going to see it. They don't play that way. They're not going to start now. Like, what? So what are we talking about? Like, come on.
It was the right call. No, it was the right call. It was the right call. Well, we'll close the Panic Room forever on this. We'll go back to the ACC tournament where Duke kind of fulfilled the mission. I know great. I've been getting a little bit of pushback for making a point that I found it surprising that John Shire didn't get a single vote for ACC Coach.
I'm with you on that.
I'm not saying he should have won it, but when I see some names getting votes, including Tony Bennett, by the way, at Virginia, it makes me wonder.
Tony Bennett getting votes, but I thought Shire should have got. I'm fine with him getting votes. I thought that.
No, what I'm getting at with if we are of this attitude that, because typically the pushback is, well,
Tony doesn't get the top recruiting class.
They underperform, top recruiting class, blah 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, but the expectation at Virginia is to win the league every year. The expectation at Virginia, regardless of what their recruiting class is to be a pain in your ass and be in the running. And he did exactly that again. So why are we giving him credit? I feel like after 2019, Tony should kind of be put in the same position that Kay and Roy had been, where, no, this is what you do. So
he's always going to be looked at differently because of the recruiting difference. I know. That is the way it doesn't translate to football, but it's true. And I don't know why, because recruiting is part of coaching, but that's just the way it is.
But with Shire, it also tells me that it hammers home the point that the coach of the year should just be renamed, "Hey, our bad, we thought you would suck." Okay? Because that's what the coach of the year is. Sorry, we thought you would suck this year, but you didn't. So here's your
It's especially true in basketball, yeah.
It's totally true in basketball. And I think a lot of that had to do with Pitt. Look, a lot of people, including me, did not think that Pitt was going to be good this year. There was an unknown. But Jeff Capel did what coaches in the ACC are going to have to do going forward. And what Kevin Keats has done.
Get the right fits.
Kevin Keats did it. Steve Forbes has done it. Yep. Get that right transfer portal guy, and anything's possible. And they had a really, really great year.
And honestly, I give Pitt less grief too for their non-conference schedule not being as good, because why wouldn't you schedule that way? Like, you're trying to get your team confident and going into ACC play feeling good about itself. At the end of the day, that's what happened after kind of a rough start to the season. Clemson had no business having, you know what I mean? Like, it's different in that way, right? Like, Pitt was kind of new guys. You're not sure what you're going to get. Got to ease into things. Clemson had a pretty experienced group coming back. Like,
I just feel like if the coach of the year is about something, it's about, actually coaching. And if you watched Duke this year, from the beginning of the year with injuries, guys who were heralded but that did not look the part early on.
Let's not forget, Duke and Carolina were in the same conversation when it comes to postseason. What, a month and a half ago at the most?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and I think the way they've played down the stretch has also kind of been like, we got our ass kicked. Now we're taking this personally and we're moving on. I do think that the loss at Virginia was a bit of an inflection point for guys like Kyle Filipowski, like John Shire, and I feel like they really have turned it on from that point. I mean, I asked Kyle Filipowski after the championship game, like, I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I don't know how online you are, but clearly this felt like it was a little bit more personal in the NCAA tournament because you were taking care of business against teams that had clowned you in some shape or form. Or in the case of Filipowski, had 0 points. He had a bad game against Virginia. Or in the case of Miami, they whooped their ass. And then they took care of business. And I'm not saying that Duke is some sort of Final Four contender. I'm just saying it was really, really important. I don't know. There's no monster out there. I'm just saying that all things considered, on top of the Coach K replacement angle, I think John Shire did a really, really good job this season, and it was rewarded with going undefeated at home at Cameron Indoor. It's the first time
which hadn't happened in almost a decade. He's a brand new head coach, even though he'd been on staff before. Those are things that do typically get rewarded, and so you have to point back to recruiting. Honestly, that's the only thing that you could point to that would point to no votes.
And even if we understand that not all 5-star recruits are equal, I mean, Duke certainly knows this. Carolina certainly knows this. And then becoming the first player to win an ACC championship and coach to win an ACC championship. So you couldn't have asked for a better start. And that's ultimately my takeaway of this. I basically 2 takeaways of the ACC tournament. That I feel like this season was we'll see what happens in the NCAA tournament. But for the most part, I think that Mike Krzyzewski and John Shire can leave this first season feeling successful. Strip away the case-specific farewell stuff. The idea that this transition was going to work differently than other transitions paid off. It paid off with an ACC championship and a team that really looks strong going into the NCAA tournament.
I mean, I don't know, to be honest, right? Like, do I know if it would have been super different if, like, he'd left and, more like Roy did? I don't know that.
No, I think it would have. No, I think it would have been different because clearly Kay wanted somebody on staff for the year and for somebody to understand, for the recruits to understand, you're playing for this guy. There's no surprises. You're coming to play for him. There's a transition. This is who it's going to be. You're coming to play for him, blah, 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 blah. So I don't think if it had gone, the traditional way, it wouldn't have worked. I don't think it would have worked. So I would say that John Shire gets the win with the ACC championship and Mike Krzyzewski gets a win for how this season played out because in year 1, his succession plan seems to have paid off. Now, we'll see what happens with college basketball. Got to get the transfer portal right. You got to mesh those guys with recruits too. But I do like how things have started at Duke under John Shire. Well, Lauren, that's it. That's it. I feel like Greensboro for the ACC tournament too kind of comes full circle because I hadn't been there since everything shut down in the pandemic. I know you were there for a 2021 pandemic ACC tournament.
I was. That was quite an experience. Yeah, that was the last time I've been. Yeah, that's the last time I was there.
And I do feel like there was some sort of transition at this ACC tournament in Greensboro with how media is going. And I'll just speak candidly here. I don't think we have to look very far to understand that priorities in this business have changed.
Yep.
There's less of an emphasis on digital content producers like Lauren, and that's why things have played out for her at Capital Broadcasting the way they have. You can still see her stuff this year with some of the articles and whatnot, but there's less emphasis on things like that, and there's been a shift in what I even do and how I go about multi-platform stuff and reproducing and repackaging the things that we already do. But again, you can see it everywhere. It's not just an R company thing. It's literally across the board.
Yeah.
As the priority has shifted to team-produced multi-platform content and ESPN. I mean, by the time the players and coaches get to us, they've already done like 3 different things, making sure that all the broadcast partners are taken care of before they get to traditional media. So basically, we have to find different angles. And that's ultimately what we tried to do, Lauren, in 2016 with the ACC Panic Room. We tried to find a different angle of talking about the ACC. And I want to thank everybody who has watched us over the last couple of years. I know that you and I have experienced this, people coming up going, not because of the radio, not because of what you wrote, but because, hey, really enjoy the Panic Room. We've had people in the ACC, whether it's coaches or ADs, tell us they enjoy the Panic Room. So it's been very, very cool.
Still mind-blowing, but whatever.
Yes.
It's always like, oh, God, you watched that? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't say anything bad. If I did, I was just kidding. I'm sorry.
It's just jokes. Hashtag go ACC. Just hashtag go ACC.
Yeah, and I think you deserve a lot of praise as well and a shout out because you do a lot of the work for this in terms of like literally I just get on here and talk. Like that's basically
but it's your platform. This was set up for your platform.
I'm just saying, you've done it even late nights, when you're ready to go to bed. You've stayed up to let the video, go on the website and load all the way and all of that and, write a headline and do all of that kind of stuff. And yes, I was doing other stuff along the way too, but I'm just, you appreciate you for that and for kind of like helping me see there might be something here when we started doing it. And it worked. You guys seem to get a kick out of my weird facial expressions. They're just my face. Sorry or sorry / thank you. I don't know. I don't know what to.
The screen grabs that never made it to WRAL Sports Fan. I mean, I got a whole collection of them.
Maybe we should. Maybe we'll start like a Substack or a Patreon someday and do like for all of y'all who always wanted like a Panic Room After Dark with us having thrown back a couple. Maybe we'll do that someday.
Maybe
subscribers only. We'll
Get the Patreon going. Let's go. Anyway, thanks to everybody who checked out the ACC Panic Room. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes.
And you will see us other places. We got more stuff coming on down the line, but it's time. It's time to sunset the ACC Panic Room, and we will. It was the hashtag Go ACC friends we made along the way, Lauren.
It really was.
So usually I say, see y'all next week. We'll see you on social media. We'll see you on WRL Sports Fan. We'll see you on 99.9.